Jesus had the idea that people should be all loving and compassionate and forgiving. Uh, that's a great idea. Um, Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, who some think is the sort of philosopher king behind the Nazi movement, which probably he was, felt that each individual and each ethnicity, I guess, as a collective, should just be as powerful as it can be. And that if you don't work out your anger and aggressiveness and greediness and selfishness, then you have betrayed yourself. I think that's, in a way, I think that's probably a reasonably good summary. I think that the second one could rightly be described as evil. It's a strange thing because Friedrich Nietzsche came 1800 years after Christ, and he was a philosopher writing in what people think of as the most cultured civilization in the world, which was German culture. I think that it was considered the most cultured in terms of philosophy, at least, and probably the arts and sciences and everything in the world until about until the First World War, and perhaps after. And so the question is, how could these educated people have behaved so barbarously, especially in the Second World War? And a lot of people point to a guy named Friedrich Nietzsche. I read his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, when I was a kid, and man, that guy has got a style of his own. Absolutely good fun to read. There's a reason why, it was even available 100 years or more after it was written in a different language, right? It's entertaining, so I loved it. I love the style. I don't know that I understood anything it was saying. Okay, so there's this separation in time between these two great philosophers, and as it turns out, I guess it would have been about 400 years before Christ, the Athenians had already worked it out. And what they suggested was that it depends on the circumstance. Of course, there's a lot of circumstances when the thing you want to be is compassionate and forgiving and generous and loving and all of the rest of it. Obviously, right? But what they said is that there's also a time to be aggressive and angry, and I think that would imply even violent. And that you were not a full human being until you could use your reasoning to decide, is this situation fit for one set of values or is it set for another set of values? A very basic instinct is the instinct to protect your children. So, according to the Nazis and according to Friedrich Nietzsche, protecting your children, and I think most people can understand that's an occasion for violence. Perhaps it could be easily. Most people are both of those things anyway, and almost everybody understands that you need some rationality in the middle to decide upon which one. So the psychopath is going to be all about satisfying his ego, satisfying his instincts. And the people on the other side are going to be preaching forgiveness and compassion and generosity all the time. But the problem with the generous, compassionate, forgiving attitude is that it breeds weak people. It makes a sort of a virtue out of weak people because they're there to be helped. So is it really compassionate to make people weak? Such are the questions of philosophy, obviously. And this is a 5-minute and 53-second introduction to another news story that came out. Came out this morning. Matt Walsh, he's what you would call a right-wing extremist. Works with Ben Shapiro. And he has reported on a story in the United States where a mayor has come to the school board meetings. I don't know if you're familiar with how raucous school board meetings are becoming in the United States right now, but parents are showing up at schools and saying, enough of your wokeness, enough of your critical race theory, enough of your transgender theory, enough of all of it. And I think this is the bravest person I think that I've seen yet is the mayor of a city who's come out and said, he came to the school board meeting and he said, I want you all to quit. And I think that this would probably apply to all the teachers at school. I don't know what you're going to do. But you're going to quit or you're going to be charged. And the reason that the mayor said that, so I don't know if this story will become common knowledge or not, but the reason that he said that is because high school teachers, and I think this was a fairly regular thing, sort of standard practice, probably for a few years, was giving his high school students, so they were giving their high school students writing assignments that were essentially pornographic. I remember 2. I don't remember the 3rd. I don't really want to remember them. It's boring. Talk about sex is boring unless it's funny. That's what I think. So the assignment that the teachers have been given the students is to write a sex scene that your mother would not approve of. So high school is what, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. A sex scene I'm going to go ahead and describe probably as pornographic. And this story illustrates a really central tenet of socialism, and that is that the state is responsible for raising children and not the parents. So the state in this situation, and in a lot of situations, is saying you don't have the right to say what sort of writing assignments are happening in school, and that you wouldn't show your mom. So I'm assuming that if this is a story you wouldn't show your mom, you're not going to show it to your mom. So this is being done in secret from the parents. I don't know. I guess actually for sure the kids squealed on the teachers. Otherwise, how would you know, right? Or maybe one of the teachers behaved bravely and honorably for a change. So what was I going to say about that? Yeah, I think that what you have to ask yourself, is there any line? So you go with critical race theory, you go with transgender ideology, you go with feminism, you go with these things. Is there a line at some point where you're going to say, okay, it's gone too far? Is there any line? And there's a lot of societies that live with no line. Nazi Germany, or at least Berlin, had no line in terms of behavior. Germans were whores to the world after the First World War. So it wasn't just a question of talking, it was a question of what they did. Little known fact about pre-Second World War Germany. And it was one of the things that the Nazis said, no, our relatives aren't going to be whored out because we owe so much money to banks. It's just the truth. So yeah, what you have to ask yourself, I think, is there any line? Because if there's a line somewhere, then the next question you need to ask is, have we crossed it? Have they crossed the line? Have they crossed the line when they ask 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids to write pornography that they wouldn't show to their mom and turn it into the teacher? So the mayor has said, yeah, resign or you're going to be charged. I don't know exactly what it is and say, I'm going to fire you and charge you. It's Christian not to do that. It's Christian to forgive. Right? But is this the time for forgiveness and compassion? Or is this the time to satisfy instincts? You have an instinct. You have good instincts and bad, bad violent instincts and caring instincts and social instincts. So what I'm suggesting is that this is one of those times when you have to think about which model of life you think is appropriate in this case. And I would suggest that given that rationality has no impact on people who think that rationality and critical thinking is a tool of white supremacy, if you can't move them in that way, then you can wait and vote them out. You can vote out the school board. I don't know what you would do with the teachers. Demand that they be fired. But so this is dangerously close to promoting violence. But if there are parents who are thinking, okay, this guy, let's say it's a male teacher. When you get into high school, you're dealing more with male teachers, right? So this guy has asked my 15-year-old daughter to write pornography for him that he wouldn't share with her mother or father, presumably. If my property taxes are paying his wages, and he has decided that this is an appropriate activity, and it's difficult to get him out of there, then I think that the Nazi approach would just be to punch his face in. And is that not perhaps the appropriate response? I can't say that for sure. I don't know. Bullshit, I know. Appropriate doesn't mean that it's the approach that I would suggest. I don't recommend it. My side stays away from political violence 100%, but maybe this is one case where it's gone too far.